How challenging was this role? It's not just a film about the connection between two characters. It's a raw exploration of two individuals grappling with their own buried emotions. But how can you create an authentic film when one of the actors refuses to even acknowledge their involvement? What could lead a man to avoid talking about Redford for his entire life? Yet at 88 years old, he shocked Hollywood by breaking his silence in a statement that left the industry stunned and speechless. At the memorial for his late friend Dustin Hoffman, the room fell silent when he stepped onto the stage. Every gaze was fixed on him as his voice, shaky yet determined, cut through the stillness. "I envy him." In that one moment, everything about their relationship changed. Join us as we delve into this story filled with mystery and emotion in today's video. If this story moved, you leave a 1 in the comments or a 0 if you feel differently. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts on the emotions this story evokes. That sentence wasn't just a late confession. It was like a door unlocking after years of being sealed, reopening a story long buried. A story of two men who were once as close as brothers, who shared the spotlight, the same films, and those quiet behind-the-scenes moments where only laughter and unspoken trust remained. Together, they reached the pinnacle of fame, embodying Hollywood's golden age. Yet no one ever truly understood why they suddenly drifted apart, choosing to remain silent for half a century, as if they had never known each other. Some speculated rivalry, others pointed to pride or professional jealousy, but the truth had remained unsaid. Now, at the age of 88, Dustin Hoffman has decided to break that silence. What really happened between Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford? How did two men once as close as brothers become silent strangers for half their lives? In the 1940s, on the sun-soaked shores of California, a boy named Robert Redford grew up surrounded by the sound of crashing waves and the warmth of golden sunshine. The afternoons spent in Santa Monica with a gentle mother and a strict father formed the backbone of a typical middle-class family that taught Redford early on how to move with confidence in the world. Handsome, athletic, and effortlessly charming, he was exactly what Hollywood had been waiting for. At Venice High School, Redford was affectionately known as the Sunny Boy. A skilled tennis player, a talented artist, and someone who made others believe that his life was destined for success. Yet after enrolling at the University of Colorado in 1954, life took an unexpected turn. The allure of parties and a thirst for freedom led Redford to lose his scholarship and eventually his spot at the university. In 1956, he found himself wandering through Paris, Florence, and Madrid, painting and surviving on spare change. It was during this time that he realized art wasn't just about still-life paintings. It was the very essence of human existence. Returning to New York, Redford traded his paintbrush for a script and enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, where he began to learn how to master his emotions. Every gesture, every glance had to hold significance. Little did he know this calm restraint would one day make the entire world fall silent every time he appeared on screen. Meanwhile, in another part of Los Angeles, another boy was growing up under vastly different circumstances. Dustin Hoffman, born in 1937 to a poor Jewish family, quickly learned the struggles of life in small apartments, quietly overhearing his parents' concerns about rent payments. While Redford embodied the ideal image, Hoffman was an anomaly, small, not conventionally photogenic, with a quivering voice and anxious eyes. While his friends dreamed of becoming stars, Hoffman could only dream of standing on stage, even if it meant starting as an unknown extra. He did whatever it took to survive, working as a salesman, washing dishes, and serving tables at cafes in New York, after moving there in the late 1950s with just $20 to his name. By day, he raced to auditions. By night, he slept on friends' couches, living on one belief that if he was sincere enough, the audience would see it. He once said, "I don't have the looks of a star, so I have to make people believe in the soul of the character." It was in those moments of struggle and failure that the true actor within him began to emerge. Meanwhile, on the other side of the United States, Redford was living a life so perfect it almost seemed too good to be true. With his striking looks and confident presence, he quickly became a Hollywood favorite. While Hoffman struggled off Broadway, Redford found himself in plays like Barefoot in the Park and Sunday in New York, slowly climbing into the ranks of A-list actors. If Hoffman expressed his emotions with fiery intensity, Redford mastered the art of concealing them behind a smile. One was passionate, the other reserved. Both passed through New York, both took on small roles, yet their paths never crossed. Two paths, one bright and one struggling, ran parallel, as if fate had never intended them to intersect. But Hollywood's fate is a cruel, ironic twist. In 1976, while America was still reeling from the Watergate scandal, a film project titled All the President's Men was born. It was this film with Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman cast in the lead roles that brought these two contrasting worlds together, where light and shadow finally collided. Just when it seemed their paths would never cross in the world of cinema, the unexpected happened. In 1976, filmmaker Alan J. Pakula began work on All the President's Men, a movie that brought the Watergate scandal, the event that shook American politics, to the big screen. By then, Robert Redford was already a major Hollywood name, serving not only as the film's star, but also as its producer. It was Redford who pushed to cast Dustin Hoffman, a respected stage actor with a reputation for being intense in the other leading role. Their first meeting happened at the Warner Brothers offices in Los Angeles on a hot June afternoon, where Redford showed up in a crisp white shirt radiating his trademark confidence. Hoffman showed up late, his hair-tousled shirt untucked, and a cup of cold coffee gripped loosely in his hand. The studio door creaked open, and for a moment every head turned his way. Redford had arrived early, composed in a light suit, calm yet alert, his eyes fixed on the man who had just entered. The two men locked eyes without saying a word. The room went silent, not from unease, but from the sense that something electric was happening, like opposite forces drawn together. Redford reached out his hand, a faint smile on his face, a wordless welcome. Hoffman paused for just a second, then took it. Their handshake was brief but charged, as if without realizing it, they had just sparked something that would reshape American cinema. Director Alan J. Pakula, watching from across the room, later recalled, "I knew right then there was something unique between them, something no amount of rehearsal could ever produce." During the early days of filming in Washington, D.C., the two quickly found their rhythm. Redford embodied discipline, punctuality, and precision, every move calculated and deliberate. Hoffman, by contrast, was pure chaos in motion, constantly wanting to redo scenes, dissecting every line. At one point, Pakula remarked Robert could finish a scene in one take. Dustin might do 10 and still not be satisfied. Strangely enough, instead of clashing, their differences began to complement each other like two mismatched puzzle pieces that somehow fit perfectly. Every time the director called cut, Redford would smile softly, step aside and light a cigarette while Hoffman paced the set, analyzing how the light fell across his face. They argued often, voices raised and tempers flaring, only to end up laughing together a few minutes later in the makeup room. As one crew member put it, "I've never seen two men who could fight like rivals and laugh like brothers in the same day." Amid the chaos of their shooting schedule, the two began sharing dinners, talking about politics, careers, and the kind of private thoughts few in Hollywood ever voiced. Redford once admitted, "He keeps me sharp." Hoffman responded, "He gives me a sense of calm, something I don't often feel." When All the President's Men hit theaters, it became an instant sensation. Redford and Hoffman's names were everywhere, not just as leading men, but as an unforgettable duo. Audiences were captivated by their chemistry. One was calm, the other intense. One kept his distance, the other wore his heart on his sleeve. Together, they became what critics hailed as the perfect cinematic duo. Yet even at the height of their success, another emotion quietly took root, something unspoken but deeply felt by everyone around them. It was a friendship as close as brotherhood. But within that bond, a thin, invisible thread of jealousy wound its way through every glance, every smile, every word of praise. And over the years, that friendship slowly grew into a weight neither man could bring himself to admit. After the massive success of All the President's Men, Hollywood couldn't get enough of the golden duo Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. Two men who couldn't have been more different, one calm, the other impulsive. One cool and composed, the other fiery and passionate, yet together, they created an on-screen chemistry that mesmerized audiences. They showed up side by side at premieres, walked red carpets together, and sat next to each other in the front row. The cameras always found them, Redford with his quiet, easy smile, Hoffman with that intense, searching stare. And those images, intentional or not, always carried a kind of closeness that made people pause and look twice. Then one April evening in 1976 at a New York film premiere, fate stepped in. When a reporter asked about the pressure of working together, Hoffman leaned over and whispered something that made Redford laugh, a rare, genuine laugh that seemed to light up the whole room. A paparazzo caught the moment, and by the next morning the photo was everywhere, splashed across newsstands with a sensational headline. Was there more than friendship between them? That was the spark that started it all. At first, both men brushed off the rumors. In an interview with Rolling Stone, Hoffman joked, "If caring about your co-star is a crime, then I must be Hollywood's biggest offender." That half-serious, half-joking comment quickly became a headline. By the next day, tabloids like the National Enquirer and Hollywood Insider had turned it into wildfire, a story of a friendship that supposedly blurred its boundaries. The secret behind the Watergate duo Redford and Hoffman. They believed staying silent would make the rumors fade, but in a world ruled by cameras and speculation, silence only fueled the fire. The less they said, the more people were convinced there was something to hide. When a photo surfaced of Redford and Hoffman with their arms around each other at the 1977 Golden Globe Awards, People magazine ran it on the cover with the caption, "A friendly gesture or something more." Redford, who loathed the spotlight, began to retreat. He no longer offered that easy smile when cameras were trained on him. Hoffman, outwardly composed, was said to be losing sleep, dodging the press, and growing irritable during interviews. On one occasion, when a reporter asked bluntly, "Do you love Robert Redford?" Hoffman smiled, but his eyes darkened. "No," he said, "I just love what we created together." It was an honest answer, yet in Hollywood's calculating world, it was quickly twisted into something else. Amid the storm of speculation, there were still rare, quiet moments that they guarded fiercely. An assistant later recalled that at a press conference in Beverly Hills, when reporters swarmed Hoffman with questions about their special relationship, Redford quietly stepped forward, resting a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Let them write," he whispered. "They need stories. We don't." Hoffman simply nodded. But from that day on, no one ever saw them laughing freely in front of the cameras again. The rumors didn't destroy their friendship all at once, they eroded it slowly. Each article, each photo, each half-joking question became a tiny blade chipping away at something they had once guarded with absolute trust. As time went on, the distance between them widened. Redford turned to directing while Hoffman threw himself into intense, often tormenting roles, and their encounters grew rare until they eventually stopped altogether. In Hollywood, they were still hailed as the perfect duo always imagined side by side. But in reality, a heavy silence had settled between them, too thick for either to pierce. And after all the rumors, the exaggerated photos, and the sensational headlines, only one truth remained: the friendship once celebrated as Hollywood's most beautiful had become a quiet wound that both endured in silence. But the real reason for their estrangement wasn't the rumors. It lay deeper in a quiet, more profound pain, far more excruciating than anyone could imagine. After the storm of speculation had passed, what remained between them wasn't resentment. It was a void, a space where pride, ego, and unspoken emotions collided. From being so close that words were unnecessary, they became two names that existed together only in print, never in reality. And from that silence, their paths finally diverged, each carrying half of a bond that had once made Hollywood stop and marvel. After All the President's Men, Hollywood assumed they would share the screen many more times. But when the film ended, a chapter of their lives closed as well. Robert Redford took a new path, one of light fame and responsibility. Dustin Hoffman, true to form, chose the winding, challenging, and often lonely road. By the late 1970s, Redford had turned to directing, creating films that were both gentle and profound, like Ordinary People and A River Runs Through It. Later, he founded the Sundance Institute, opening doors for a new generation of independent filmmakers. Redford became an idealized figure, handsome, principled, and successful, the kind of man America wanted to believe in. What do you think about the career paths Redford and Hoffman took after All the President's Men? Do you think their choices reflect who they truly became? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts on these pivotal turning points in the lives of two Hollywood legends. The press dubbed Redford the last noble soul of Hollywood. Meanwhile, Hoffman was hailed as the acting genius of his generation. He threw himself into darker, more complex roles, from Kramer vs. Kramer to Rain Man, bringing to life characters full of flaws, sensitivity, and often an elusive aloofness. His relentless pursuit of perfection earned him a reputation for being temperamental, arrogant, and difficult to work with. Behind the scenes, people often said, Hoffman didn't just act, he lived too deeply. Two men, two paths, one celebrated as an icon, the other revered and feared as a brilliant, challenging artist. As Redford walked the red carpet collecting honors and accolades, Hoffman quietly receded into the shadow of his former self. But the most painful distance wasn't measured in fame or miles, it was the distance in their eyes. At award shows, when cameras caught them together, they still offered polite smiles, yet their gazes no longer met as they once had. At the 1982 Oscars, the camera captured a fleeting moment. Hoffman looked away as Redford passed. A brief nod, but his eyes shifted just enough for anyone watching closely to sense that something between them had broken irreparably. Mutual friends recalled that in the 1990s, whenever Redford's name came up, Hoffman would fall silent. He would remain quiet for a long while, not out of anger, not out of resentment, but from a quiet, lingering sadness. The man he had once known so well that he could finish his sentences had become just a name that made his heart ache. And Redford, too, felt the distance. When asked about Hoffman, he would answer calmly, "I respect him. After all, we created something memorable together. No bitterness, no nostalgia, just a brief sentence that sounded like a quiet farewell." By the 2000s, as Redford focused on Sundance and Hoffman appeared less frequently, the two were rarely seen together. It was as if they had silently agreed that silence was the only way to honor what once was. Then one day they unexpectedly crossed paths at an art fundraiser in Beverly Hills. Amid the crowd, Hoffman froze watching Redford step onto the stage, his hair now silver, yet that familiar, calm smile still in place. When Redford turned, their eyes met for a brief instant. No words were exchanged, only a subtle nod, a quiet acknowledgement that said, "I still remember." They stayed polite, reserved, and distant like two men who had once inhabited entirely different worlds. After that night, Hoffman returned home late. A friend remembered seeing him sit in front of the TV for hours, watching an old 1976 interview, the one where he and Redford laughed together while reminiscing about the men of the president. When the friend asked, "Do you ever want to see him again?" Hoffman simply replied, "I'm afraid I wouldn't know what to say anymore." The two men, once as close as brothers, could now only communicate through old articles and memories preserved on film. For nearly 2 decades, they remained silent, a silence both proud and painful, like a scar that drew no blood, yet throbbed whenever it was touched. And then when Robert Redford passed away, Dustin Hoffman finally let down that wall with a confession that touched the world. In September 2025, news of Redford's death swept through Hollywood. No warning, no long illness, just a quiet morning when he passed away peacefully in his sleep at his Sundance home. That day, Hoffman was in Los Angeles working on a small, independent film. When his assistant approached and whispered, "Robert Redford has passed away," he nodded silently. A few seconds later, his eyes glistened, and he turned away so no one would see. A crew member recalled that he stood motionless for 5 minutes, then gently set down the camera and stepped outside for a cigarette. No one on the set dared to speak. That evening, Hoffman returned home, turned on his old TV, and watched a 1976 interview again himself and Redford, laughing, reminiscing about Watergate. In the quiet of the night, he hastily scribbled a few lines in his notebook. "Perhaps I didn't say enough." 3 weeks later, he arrived at the memorial in Sundance, ready to voice what he hadn't dared tell his friend for half a century. Late afternoon in Sundance, Utah, a cool breeze drifted through the wooden windows of the small hall where the memorial was held. A soft amber light bathed rows of black and white photographs of Robert Redford lining the aisle. Redford on set as a young man, Redford smiling behind the scenes, Redford standing amid rolling hills. In the front row sat his longtime colleagues and a few young directors he had once championed. The press had been asked to keep their cameras quiet, yet the lenses still followed silently. Then Dustin Hoffman appeared, hair white as snow, dressed in a black suit, shoulders slightly stooped, his left hand resting on the podium, the right clutching a wrinkled sheet of paper. He paused as if to catch his breath, then lifted his gaze to the largest portrait of Redford hanging at the center. The host's voice rose slightly. If you could say one last thing to him, what would it be? The hall seemed to hold its breath, swallowed by silence. Hoffman bowed his head. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The faint rustle of paper was the only sound. A woman in the second row gripped her armrest tightly. The lighting technician dimmed the lights one more notch by accident. Reporters in the back raised their cameras, then lowered them again, hesitant to break the fragile moment suspended in the air. Hoffman finally lifted his head, his voice low and hoarse. "I'm sorry." I was jealous of him, and that jealousy is what killed our friendship. No whisper, just a breath released and then held again. He stopped swallowing back tears behind his thin glasses. "Robert once pulled me out of a storm in this business. He had said I believed in you when all of Hollywood didn't." I never returned those words to him. In the fourth row, a silver-haired director handed a tissue to the person beside him. Behind them, a cameraman lowered his lens, telling himself not to capture this moment. Hoffman unfolded the sheet of paper but didn't read it. One night after the screening of Ordinary People, Robert called me. I didn't answer. 3 days later, he sent a small card. "Wish you were here." I never replied. The words fell to the wooden floor like tiny pebbles. A female reporter taking notes abruptly paused, lifting her head as if to confirm she'd heard correctly. In the far right corner of the hall, a member of Redford's press team shifted slightly, blocking the harsh light that had been shining on Hoffman. The small gesture seemed to warm the entire row. Hoffman exhaled not to summon courage, but as if to release the weight that had pressed on his chest for decades. He spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. "I used to think I only admired him. Today I understand. Perhaps I cherished him more than I ever dared to admit. It wasn't romantic love. The kind of bond that makes you want to be close yet fear being fully seen." In the family section, someone nodded faintly. In the press area, a few shutters clicked, then fell silent. The photographers understood this was a moment to listen, not to capture. He closed his eyes briefly, then met the gaze of Redford's smiling portrait. "I spent my whole life trying to prove I was different from him. But in the end, I only wished we could sit together once more like the two guys who laughed until they cried in the makeup room back in 1976. A sigh drifted from the back row, belonging to no one in particular. The host gripped the microphone but said nothing. Backstage, a technician stood frozen hand on the lever, letting the silence settle over him. Hoffman folded the paper slowly, as if closing a debt long overdue. "I learned this far too late," he said, his voice hoarse. "Sometimes jealousy is just the way we hide our truest feelings." He didn't bow. He simply placed his palm on the podium, tapped it twice in farewell, and stepped back. The entire hall rose almost in unison, yet no one applauded. Not out of doubt, but because they understood some truths once spoken must remain in silence. As Hoffman descended the final steps, the press team hesitated. A young reporter poised a question, then closed his notebook, whispering, "Later." A major newspaper texted its editor, "Keep the headline gentle. This piece isn't for sensation." In the lobby, television cameras waited, but the lead producer signaled to film only the exit, sparing him any disturbance. The memorial continued with a short violin piece, its melody rising to the wooden ceiling, then dissolving into the night sky like a farewell. When the doors opened, Hoffman walked down a corridor lined with photo prints. He paused before a photograph of Redford in a snow-covered forest, smiling faintly, the kind of smile never meant for the camera. No one captured that moment. The only person nearby turned away, leaving him a small, private island after years of distance. In that instant, everyone present seemed to understand that Hoffman wasn't seeking forgiveness, but restoring the rightful place of a friendship, long misrepresented by lights and headlines. As he exited the hall, a cold breeze from the eaves brushed against his back. The music faded and the murmurs softened, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. The editors on Wall Street and Sunset Boulevard began to type, but that day their words came slower, gentler. No one wanted to interpret anymore. The story was being told by a man who had lived his life fully without embellishment, without defense, just the fragile honesty of someone once regarded as one of the most powerful figures in Hollywood. Each word he spoke carried a calmness, but also an unmistakable sadness. In that moment, everyone understood that the truth Hoffman had carried quietly for half a century wasn't about guilt. It was about vulnerability. The moments of weakness he endured, those no one could see, led him to painful choices and bouts of torment. In the end, after fame, pride, and silence had run their course, what remained was the vulnerability we rarely dare to acknowledge. The story no longer centered on who was right or wrong, but on what they had left for each other after the spotlight faded. It wasn't about challenges or triumphs, but the deep impressions they had made on one another, marks of forgiveness, empathy, and a friendship that endured through all the storms Hollywood had thrown their way. Robert Redford rested in peace at Sundance, the place where he had devoted his life to nurturing art, where every brick and every tree bore the mark of a man who believed cinema could redeem the world. Outside, snow blanketed the wooden rooftops. Inside, the memorial lights still fell softly on his gentle smile, glowing like the last rays of the sun. Hundreds of miles away in Los Angeles, Dustin Hoffman sat alone in his small house, an old piano leaning against the wall, a half-finished script on the table. He gazed out the window as dusk settled over the red-tiled roofs and whispered, "He was the only one who made me believe there's still real friendship in Hollywood." His voice was raspy, as if it rose from the deepest part of his chest, each word heavy with a sorrow almost impossible to put into words. Beside him lay an old notebook, its pages yellowed with age, the final page unfinished, a sentence left hanging. "If I could turn back time, I would pick up the phone." So simple a phrase, yet it carried an ocean of emotions he could never fully express. Their story, though it had ended long ago, continues to echo in the hearts of those who remember. Its reverberations never fade, because what they left behind wasn't just remarkable performances or moments of glory on screen, but profound lessons about envy, forgiveness, and relationships that endure the test of time, growing stronger even in the silence that lasted for half a century. These values live on in memories, in quiet encounters, and in the contemplative glances of those who once witnessed it all. Two men, one still alive, the other now only a memory, continue to walk side by side in a realm somewhere between the glitz and shadows of Hollywood. Though one has passed on, their bond was never truly broken, lingering in untold stories, in the flickering lights, and in the shadows that haunt Hollywood's legacy. They live on in the traces of the past, in images that cannot fade from a golden era long gone, yet mysteriously still present, like figures who have never truly vanished. And perhaps in the noisy world we inhabit, a friendship still exists that was never truly ended, even if it no longer appears in tabloids or shines under stage lights. Somewhere it continues to live on in the hearts of those who once witnessed that extraordinary connection. What do you think about this lasting friendship? Is the connection between them truly something more special than the Hollywood glamour? Leave a comment with a 1 if today's story inspired you, or a 0 if you have a different opinion. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next fascinating story. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.